still working on the Race Jeep. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. I know a lot of you have been patiently waiting for a King of the Hammers recap video, and that is coming soon. I've been waiting on footage, but I think we finally have our hands on it. In the meantime, it's time to do a walk around, kind of damage report, take a look at the Jeep, see what happened, see what worked, see what we need to fix, and hopefully knock all those projects out by the end of this video. That way the Jeep is off the lift and we can start doing other projects with the lift, and we can take it out and have some fun. Overall, there's really no major damage to the Jeep. There's a few small things here and there, but overall it held up really well. Now, the one thing that did take us out of the race was our transmission oil pan. So we are gonna start with this project first, pull the old one out of there, see how bad it is. Should just be an easy transmission pan swap, throw our new dipstick and filler tube on there, and then check out some of the other projects that we have to knock out on the Jeep. I have already pulled the skid plate off, got everything pretty much removed from under the Jeep, and it's crazy how one small little dent right here in the trans pan can take us out of the entire race. So luckily it is an easy fix, and there is a nice little story behind all the JB weld up in here, but we'll get to that once we can pop the pan, because I am curious to kind of remove all of the JB weld just to show you guys how bad the crack was. Now, unfortunately, the only reason this cracked is because our skid plate bent up into the corner of the trans pan. So that is one thing we're gonna have to work on and kind of build better before next year at Hammers, is a really a full skid plate that comes all the way up here, and then we have to have something that attaches up to the chassis to prevent it from swinging up in. I think it's self-drained, so there shouldn't be fluid up in there, but you never know what's actually all the way in there in the back. There we go.
All right, 3 left.
So our first shot of the repair was actually covering it with the Sound Assassin, and it worked. It just didn't hold it for that long there.
Ah, you covered up one more bolt.
Ah, perfect. There you go.
That
you can
makes
see
sense.
Oh. So luckily, everything inside of the transmission actually looks good. The pickup just popped off when we pulled the pan, but other than that, there's no physical damage to the transmission underneath. I was a little worried about that, you know, with the pan cracked. I was afraid that maybe something in here got damaged as well, but luckily everything looks good. There's no damage up here to the case. We should be good just to throw the new pan on and go from there.
It looks good too. There's nothing wrong with it, so we can reuse it.
So we can reuse that. That's 40 bucks saved. The Moroso gasket for the win. What we are doing this time, just to change it up and make sure this doesn't happen, is switching over to a steel pan. You know, and Mike and I kind of discussed this. We went with the really thick, heavy-duty aluminum deep sump pan because aluminum pans do dissipate heat better. But what happens when you hit aluminum is it doesn't bend. In our case, cast aluminum, it actually cracked right there. So you can see from the inside just how much this pan splintered.
Wow.
And yeah, if it was
I hadn't even looked at it from
if
the
it was a
inside like
steel
that yet.
pan, the steel would have bent up a little bit, not shattered, and it would have been an easier repair. So
And now you know to carry JB weld with you.
yes, yeah, so the JB Weld story. That was on my list to put in our spare parts bag, and just with everything happening so fast, forgot the JB Weld. When that happened, it cracked. We actually, first thing we went for was the HotHead, the Sound Assassin that we had a few spots on the floor, so we peeled that up as best as we could and slapped that on, and it was actually kind of holding a little bit. And we poured like 2 or 3 quarts of ATF in, but it was still seeping out because it's not a sealant. Finally, I need to find out who it was, but one of the racers came by. He was looking for coolant because he was having a major coolant leak. He had JB Weld, so we did a little swap. I traded him all the coolant we had for all of the ATF he had, as well as the JB Weld. Unfortunately, the JB Weld just, it didn't do the job. We'd almost need like 2 or 3 cases of JB Weld for that. Plus, it was just still leaking transmission fluid, so it never really dried up. Long story short, it did not work, and we ran out of time just because of this right here. We lost all the trans fluid. But we quickly found out there at Hammers, when we were trying to refill the transmission with fluid, it was not working very well. So I didn't bring a funnel with us. When we built the Jeep, we actually started out with a shorty dipstick on the trans. Now, Ultra 4 rules, you have to have a locking dipstick, and I talked a while back about how expensive they were. So I went with the shorty dipstick because it was like 110 bucks, opposed to the long dipstick, which was 200 and something bucks. Now, unfortunately, where we have that dipstick, or where the dipstick is it's really close to the exhaust, and it's hot under there.
It's probably very hot after 10 hours of racing.
And it's almost impossible to fill it from down there. So I think I have some video clips of us trying to fill that out there. We had to use a tiny hose. We actually pulled the radiator overflow hose right there, that tiny one, which has a very small inside diameter. We cut up a water bottle to use as a funnel. It took about like 45 minutes to put maybe 2 quarts in there. Even if the JB Weld held, it wouldn't, there's no way we'd be able to put like 8 quarts of fluid in the trans in a timely manner. Today, once we get our new pan in, we are going to install a long dipstick. It is locking just like the other one. So you pull the bottom tab and it pulls up. So we'll meet all the rules, and we will be able to fill the trans remotely from the engine bay. But that is enough yapping. Let's get this new pan installed.
We got the trans pan in. The next step would be to go ahead and route the dipstick, but we're gonna wait until we can lower the Jeep so we can find a good spot to put it.
And before we start hooking up our axles and getting everything put back together, there was one more issue that I found while we were under the Jeep, and this was actually a few days ago, so I'm gonna go ahead and go back and show you guys that. We had a link bolt up here in the cross member on our driver's side get loose at some point, and it wallowed out the hole in here, and it's fully welded in, so this is not coming out very easily at all. And with these holes wallowed out, it definitely scared me for a second, but luckily we were able to put in a repair weld washer. So what we're gonna go over just real quick is weld washers, how to prevent this, and if you do get a wallowed out bolt hole, it's not too hard to fix, and it actually increases the strength with repair weld washers. Here we have a weld washer, and here we have a repair weld washer. Both of these are from Barnes 4-wheel drive. We're gonna give you guys a quick rundown on when to use these and what they're for. Simply put, we have a bolt and bracket. We can actually increase the material thickness where the bolt goes through with a weld washer. So it's super simple. If it's a 5/8 hole, use a 5/8 weld washer. If it's a 1/2 inch hole, use a 1/2 inch. What we're gonna do is prep the metal, put our bolt through, tighten the nut so we know it's in the right spot, and then we are going to just add a few welds. You can either weld the whole thing or just do the top and bottom and maybe 4 corners. However you wanna do it, as long as it's welded to the bracket, we are going to increase our material thickness on where the bolt actually rests, and it also disperses kind of that bolt torque throughout the bracket a little bit better. Now on the other side of that, if we don't have a weld washer on there and our bolt hole ends up wallowing out really bad, we can actually get a repair weld washer. So this is a 5/8 repair weld washer, which means to make the repair, we have to be able to at least open it up to a 7/8. And if we drill our hole out, whether it was oblong, egg-shaped, ovaled, drill out a much bigger size, place this inside there so it fixes our wallowed hole situation, and it still actually gives us more material thickness. In this case, we'd have to grind that down flush. So this is the repair that I had to make over on the link on the driver's side, just because that was the only bolt that actually worked itself loose and started moving. So all the other 3, we won't have to do the drill and do the full repair weld washer. We'll just have to add some weld washers to prevent this from happening. It is fairly difficult to get up in here and prep the metal for welding. So that actually did a really good job cleaning that out in there. But as you can tell, our bolt hole on this side is not wallowed, so there's no need for the repair weld washer. We can now just add and weld up our weld washer in there. Now it is a very tight fit with the nozzle getting in here, and I can't weld all the corners, and this side didn't turn out so great. Don't judge my welds, but I could only get those like top 3, and I mean, it's definitely welded in there enough, and it's in a spot nobody's gonna see. It's very ugly, but they're gonna hold. Same with that one. You know, you could only get the nozzle in right here, but that's about a whole quarter, and it still sits nice and flush. That's enough to hold these weld washers in. Just try to stick something else up on this side to prep that, then we should be good to go. We're gonna go ahead and slide one weld washer onto our bolt, stick it in the hole, and add our second weld washer on our nut side. So what we're looking to do here in this step is to make sure we tighten this down tight enough, but we still wanna make sure that our bolt spins freely. What we don't wanna happen is just for some reason those weld washers to be in a bind and not let it go in and out. We are good to go ahead. Start tacking it up. Now that I've welded one, I like to make sure I can still do the same thing. Twist it with ease, make sure that washer didn't distort. Weld up the other side. Well, once again, definitely not the prettiest, but that is the most we can actually get up in there and weld it. So that turned out halfway decent, and this one's almost just as worse. So I might actually go back up in there and try to get that that top corner. So I'm starting to realize what a lot of race guys do in their off time is, you know, a lot of little repairs like this take a long time. This isn't anything major, but something that needs to get done before we take this thing out and start racing it again. So those two were the only major repairs that we actually have to make to the Jeep, but there is a ton of impacts from rocks. We're gonna walk around and show you guys real quick. So first off is the pitman arm skid. That took a major hit right here, and I'm glad we added this because who knows if that would have taken out our pitman arm right there. So that took a hit. The tie rod did a fantastic job taking a bunch of hits. There's a lot of scratches on it, but no damage. Our tie rod clamp for the hydro assist is almost completely ground off with the Allen head. So that is gonna have to get cut off to be removed if we ever have to. But we also added some half moon right here. North Shore Raceworks out there welded those in for us just so our tie rod wouldn't loosen up. We were having a little bit of issues with that walking side to side. The rock sliders from Out of Hand Fab did a fantastic job. Those just held up amazing. They took some major hits, and really, you can't even tell other than just some scuffed paint. You know, the heavy wall lower tubing, weld-on frame design, those things just fantastic rock sliders. And over on this side, you can see, you know, same thing. Took a bunch of hits all along the body, and even down here on the frame, we took a major hit. I don't know if the GoPro really picks it up, but yep, right there. Luckily, no actual frame damage, but that dented the frame pretty good. And then over here, skid plates, those just took an absolute beating. So this is the one that folded up into our trans pan, and you know, it's 1/4 inch steel. We reinforced the front side with you know, 1 inch tubing up there, a bunch of diagonal bracing. It just wasn't enough. We need to have some actual support go down. And then our side wing skid plates got all mangled up, but they did their job. And over here, this wasn't race day, but this was qualifying. We blew 2 nittos out just like this, the side walls, and kind of sucks because they were practically brand new, and they still are pretty much brand new. And the wheel, we bent one of these wheels right here, and it's not really a fault of the wheel. It's going down Resolution, a rock trail with a flat tire. So of course the wheel took all the impact, but that is pretty much it for the damage report. Oh, I didn't show them the body damage. Oh, and this one's unfortunate because the only body damage we have on the Jeep is right here on the fender, grill, and the hood, and that is not from a trail. That's actually from a 4800 car backing into us on Turkey Claw. So take it as it is, no big deal, it's part of racing. With all of that being said, I think we're good to start hooking everything back up and hopefully get these axles under the Jeep.
Yeah, doing something.
Not the right size washer.
This feels like a never-ending project, but we almost have it all back together with the exception of the drive shafts and the brake line.
Before we put the drive shafts in, I want to show you guys a critical spot to grease it. The centering ball of your drive shaft needs to be greased. So we're gonna hop under there, I'll show you how to find it.
It is real tiny. We were looking for it just a second ago.
Yep.
Trying to see if we could, get a good angle on it.
So this is something you should do every 5 to 10,000 miles. If you have an aftermarket drive shaft, in the middle in the middle of the double cardan joint, there is a little recessed Zerk fitting right there. So you might have to drop your drive shaft off the axle to find it, but you're gonna need a needle type grease fitting, and you're just gonna wanna put a little grease in there. This is a very important spot to grease in your drive shaft because the centering ball sees a lot of load, and if you don't grease it, eventually it will lock up and pretty much take out your transfer case and just explode it. Add it to your maintenance list. It might be pretty difficult to get to, but I'll throw some helpful parts in the video description below. So grease gun, needle tip fitting, and really that's about it. Throw some grease in there every once in a while. When your drive shafts are new, it's easy to find like this. I mean, there's mud here, but I would suggest marking on the yoke where that spot is. That way, after a few years, or after you go through the mud and get this all muddy, you just look for your mark. You can paint mark it, scribe it, whatever. That way you don't have to be searching for hours for it. You just flip it around to this spot, stick your needle fitting in and grease it. So we finally have everything back together, torqued down, the Jeep is good to go. Now the last thing we have to do is find a new spot for this guy. So I'm gonna crawl under the Jeep and we're gonna pop that in. Okay, leave it right there. This is a much better way to add transmission fluid.
After all of that work, all that's left to do is to fire it up and take it out for a little test drive.
You ready?
I'm ready. Get her out of the lift. Let's go. Fired right up.
The test drive was successful. The Race Jeep is good to go. So hopefully we'll start taking it out, have some fun here. Take it wheeling and
do some new projects now that it's not hogging the lift.
The lift is finally free after 8 months. So it's time to roll some other Jeeps in there and get to work. See you guys later.